In Dragon Ball Super, audiences have experienced a number of massive events. Beerus vs. Goku, the return of Frieza, the end of Trunks' timeline, and the Tournament of Power, all of which have taken place during the 10-year time skip after Goku defeated Kid Buu. However, as the years continue to pass in the story, and we move towards Goku's fateful meeting with Oob, one question has continued to be on the minds of audiences. When will Dragon Ball Super go beyond the 10-year time skip? And if it does, should it? Well, in this video, I'm going to be discussing why Dragon Ball must go past the end of Z. Make sure to subscribe to this channel and enable notifications so you can see all of my content right away when it comes out. Hey guys, it's Mike here, and as I said in the intro, in this video I'm going to be discussing what I believe has become an increasingly bigger problem in modern Dragon Ball, and that is Dragon Ball Super's insistence on taking place during the 10-year time skip. For those who are unaware, the 10-year time skip takes place after the defeat of Kid Buu and then leads up to Goku meeting Oob at the World's Martial Arts Tournament. Goku fighting Oob and then flying away with him takes place after Dragon Ball Super's current events, and this has been a major problem since day one. The reason for this is known by many as the prequel problem, essentially that because we've already seen the events that transpire after these events, the audience knows that all of these conflicts will turn out mostly fine for our main cast of characters. This has been a problem in other franchises too, such as the Hobbit trilogy, where we knew that Bilbo and Gandalf would survive, as well as the fact that the Necromancer would become Sauron and eventually be defeated. It was also the case in Star Wars, because we already knew that the Jedi would fall, Anakin would become Vader, Palpatine would take over the galaxy, and then they would all be toppled by Luke and the Rebellion in the original trilogy. However, Dragon Ball Super has more to do with the Star Wars prequels than The Hobbit in this case. The reason being that the Hobbit novel came out before Lord of the Rings, and director Peter Jackson elected to make the Lord of the Rings first for a number of reasons, such as popularity. Star Wars, on the other hand, began with what would be known as Episode 4, aka the middle of the story. The prequels were thus written afterward in order to be slotted into the time period before the original trilogy. Most of what became the prequels did not exist in Lucas's mind, nor was it written down until after the original trilogy. Looking at Dragon Ball Super, the same can be said. However, Super takes this to an even bigger extreme, because Super and its storylines were created decades after the Dragon Ball manga came to an end, and these current storylines are being created to be slotted into a much smaller time frame. Whereas the Star Wars prequels had decades of time to work with, Dragon Ball Super only had a 10-year gap, and 5 years if you keep in mind that Bulma said that she hadn't seen Goku in that long, although that line has long since been retconned at this point. This time frame gives them far less to work with and has been constraining the franchise since Dragon Ball first started dipping into it with Yo-Son Goku and his friends' return. However, unlike the Star Wars prequels, placing climactic events during this period of time is far more forced, because in Star Wars, while we were told that the Clone Wars, the fall of Anakin, and other events had happened during this time, in the Dragon Ball Z anime and of course the manga, this 10-year period was presented as a period of peace. So every single event that transpires during it is ultimately contradicting that. But contradictions are something that are bound to happen when you do something like this. As similarly to how the Star Wars prequels created contradictions with the original trilogy, Dragon Ball Super has done the same with Dragon Ball Z. I mentioned earlier the 5-year line from Bulma, which is one of the biggest contradictions in the series. Now, Dragon Ball Super has largely gotten away with this because of the ambiguity of when during the 10 years it takes place, as we were told that 6 months and some time had passed at the beginning of the story, and the length of the time skips are never specified. However, just using contextual clues, the timeline has long since gone past the first 5 years of the time skip, especially if we say that the same time has passed as in the Battle of Gods movie. Even Pan's age is now questionable, as we were told that she was 4 at the end of Z, meaning that she's either older now, or again, it's been contradicted. The other big elephant in the room is Oob, the reincarnation of Kid Buu and Goku's future student. Now, when the tournament with Oob first happened in Dragon Dragon Ball Z, Toriyama went out of his way to hype up Oob. Goku told Vegeta that someone really powerful was going to be at the tournament, and Goku even told Mr. Satan that someone other than his group might win, which was another reference to Oob's power. Then, when Goku and Oob were set to face off, everyone acted like that would be the true main event of the tournament. So a lot of effort went into making sure that the audience realized that this Oob kid was a big deal. Now, the reason why Oob was presented as a big deal was because the last villain that Goku faced was Kid Buu, someone who Goku didn't really get to defeat without the help of others. It took a universal spirit bomb to finally put Buu down. This is also why Goku was so giddy to train Oob, and said after the training that he wanted to go one-on-one with him. It was Goku finally getting that rematch against his greatest opponent. Yet now, looking at Dragon Ball Super, which is supposed to take place before any of this, how could anyone have reacted the way that they did here? After all, Goku faced a god of destruction who could destroy the universe. Goku himself became a god, and so did Vegeta. They even gained another form on top of that. Frieza returned and in a matter of months surpassed what Goku had accomplished. Then Goku faced a rogue god who consumed an entire timeline, followed by a man in Jiren whose power was stated to surpass a god of destruction. Then of course there's the Broly movie, where Blue Goku and Vegeta don't even compare to the Saiyan when he's at his full power. All of these opponents make Kid Buu and even Buuhan look like ants by comparison. So how can we as an audience possibly look at all of them and then what happened with Oob and say that it fits? The reactions of Goku and company don't make sense within this new continuity, yet as we've seen in the anime and manga, references to Oob still exist, and the events from the end of Z will still happen. And these are only a couple of the contradictions that have come from jamming all of these events into this peaceful time period while continuing with the theme of escalation that Dragon Ball is known for. Another problem that ties into this is progression. Going back to my example of the Star Wars prequels, we first met Anakin as a boy, an annoying boy who couldn't act, but a boy nonetheless. Soon, we saw as he grew into a man who also couldn't act, and those around him also grew older and wiser. But when we compare that to Dragon Ball Super, the same can't really be said. Because they've chosen to fit arc after arc into this small time period, much of this growth isn't visible to audiences. As I said before, the amount of time that passes in Super is largely ambiguous. As a result, it feels like it's trapped in a stasis. Just look at Goten and Trunks for example. Both of them are well into their teens by now, yet for some reason they haven't aged a day since the Buu saga. If anything, the two of them look younger than they did back then, as do many other characters. Unlike what we saw with Gohan in Dragon Ball Z, where his character was growing and developing physically, Goten and Trunks have hardly developed at all. Even as characters, they remain stale and repetitive. Many try to defend this as something inherent to the Saiyan DNA, but even Goku showed signs of aging in Dragon Ball, like when he got taller before the 22nd tournament. And this problem doesn't just extend to their race, as Marin, Krillin's daughter, should also look older by now, yet she's drawn like she's a toddler. Bulma, who looked middle-aged at the end of Z, also looks younger for no reason. Is she just supposed to age 10 plus years in the next 3? Sure, we saw that children like Pan and Bulla were born, yet they're still infants at this point, and knowing Dragon Ball Super, they'll probably have Ash Ketchum syndrome too. And then there's the character development issue, because again, we know where Goku, Vegeta, and friends end up after this 10-year time skip. We know that Vegeta is a softer father, Goten and Trunks are teenagers who barely train, Goku lives with his family and has shifted into becoming a master. This is the finish line for this point of the story. So as a result, everything we see right now is just leading up to that development, and thus isn't really much development in and of itself. Because another problem with prequels or interquels in this case is that they by definition must regress their characters. If the story takes place before our characters became who we know and love, or last left them, then the story must build to that in order to have some sort of character arc. But because it's an arc that we already know the conclusion of, it's ultimately esoteric. At the end of Dragon Ball Z, Goku was a master, Vegeta was a soft father, and Gohan a scholar. Then at the beginning of Dragon Ball Super, Vegeta wants to become become #1 again and is struggling with being a father, Gohan isn't a scholar yet, and Goku was on top and wanted to be stronger. All of their characters were taken back to an earlier time, only to be brought back to what they were decades before. And while it might be interesting to see some details here and there, it's still a lack of real progression. It's artificial progression, just like all of the tension in Super is artificial tension. Now, as Dragon Ball Super is going into a new movie and starting a new arc in the manga in the Galactic Patrol Prisoner arc, both of which are likely taking place during the same time skip, the question is, when will they finally run out of room and go past it? Because while Dragon Ball has had arcs take place during short periods of time before, like the Buu Saga and the Tournament of Power, these issues only continue to increase as more is crammed into the remaining years. Hyper-compressing time can get tiresome after a while, and eventually strangles the art being created. Stories like this often need room to grow, to allow their characters to do more, age, and find themselves in different places in their lives. But with this time skip, none of that has really happened or likely will, save for with characters who were hardly featured after the skip. So while the 10-year time skip may not be killing Dragon Ball, after all it's arguably more popular than ever, I believe that if it's to truly grow and improve as a work of art and as a story, that it must surpass the 10-year time skip. Now, when will this happen? No one can really be sure. Maybe Toriyama doesn't want to go past this skip, which is something that he's implied in past interviews about characters being beyond their prime. So it's possible that much like with Dragon Ball GT, we may never see Toriyama exploring that unknown time, and other writers may be given the ball. But it needs to happen eventually, and with GT seemingly obliterated from the continuity, there's so much room to explore with the story, with Oob, and with the next generation that once Dragon Ball finally goes past the end of Z, I can only see it improving from there. So what do you guys think? Do you think Dragon Ball Super should go past the end of Z? Let me know in the comments down below. Also, if you're new to this channel, then make sure to subscribe and enable notifications so that you can see all of my videos right away when they come out. And make sure to stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, and you better subscribe.